Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome back. You made it. Give yourselves a round of applause. This is truly the people who are going to make a difference in the supply chain. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. This is the time where we really need you to start thinking about where we're going. We've talked all day today about where we are, what we can do with the generations, with intermodal. We started off this morning with John Gordon and Charlie Armstrong about where they are with their organizations, but now we're going to look forward. So I would just ask that you start to think about that, give some thought to what we're going to be doing in the next 10 years. As the founder, Jim Bowes, talked about earlier, that is not as long from now as we think it is, and it's coming whether we like it or not. So we do need to think about what we're going to be doing and what our vision is. So I would just ask you to be engaged, have fun. This is the last session between you and the reception and dinner. So let's be as excited as we can. And to do this today, we have a pretty esteemed panel. I have to tell you, I'm pretty proud of who we were able to get together for this. So please understand, you got a lot of valuable experience and information up here. We can banter back and forth on what's going on in the industry. And I will look forward to hearing it and seeing what you guys want to talk about for the Supply Chain 2025. So who we have is the founder of NLDC and president of Peach State, Mr. Jim Bowes. We have the CEO of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, Mr. Rick Blasgen, and our moderator today is Mr. Peter Bradley, and Peter's the editorial director of DC Velocity and the CSCMP Supply Chain Quarterly, both very good magazines. I would encourage you to read those. Let's welcome our panel and our moderator.
Well, thank you very much, and I think this is going to be a fairly engaging panel. As I've mentioned to some of you during the day, this is not going to be three of us pontificating, but we really want your engagement as we discuss these topics today. I want you to talk about some of the things that are on your mind, some of the issues you're facing, some of the directions you think that your company is going to go. I talk about challenges and opportunities, but based on what John said this morning, I guess we're only talking about opportunities. There are no challenges. But I want to talk about kind of the framework for this is going to be something called the Material Handling and Logistics Roadmap. This is a document that was developed over the last summer based on 4 meetings around the country that involved a total of 100 shippers and carriers, consultants, providers of all kinds, manufacturers, and academics. And a document that was produced under the editorial direction of Kevin Gue of Auburn University. A great document. And they had a lot of things. But I'm very, very briefly going to tell you about the 10 mega trends that they identified, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of some of those and talk about what you're seeing in those trends. And the 10 mega trends that they identified were e-commerce, of course, global competition, mass urbanization, development of mobile and wearable computing, robotics and automation, what they call the Internet of Things, and we can discuss that a little bit, big data, and productive analytics. We saw something about earlier today, sustainability, and the people and the workforce. Now I'm going to add one more of my own, and that's kind of that question mark. What is going to be the disruptive technology that we don't even know about? As J.B. pointed out this morning, the iPhone is only 7 years old. And the idea of disruptive, 2 years after that, I happened to have the privilege of standing on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa and texting my wife that I was there. And she received it. So, I mean, things have changed, and the pace of change is just extraordinary. But where I'd like to start, based on a lot of what we heard today, Hannah's excellent presentation, a lot of people talking about people, really talking about people and the challenges of people. I'm going to ask you folks to get involved in just a moment, but let me ask, Rick first, who's got an organization with a lot of people who are facing these challenges. Rick, what are your customers, your members telling you about what's facing them in workforce development and retention and training and so on?
Yeah, well, as it relates to talent, Peter, I mean, it's all about how do I acquire the talent necessary to deliver my company's expectations, not only today, but in the not too distant future. So if you think about, our discipline, we were formed, as physical distribution management years ago, and then we've got into logistics as we began to coordinate the functions, and now we're supply chain management professionals, and if we find life on Mars, we'll be the intergalactic supply chain professionals and figure out how to move freight. So the discipline itself has come a really long way. We've got educational programs in universities all around the world producing great students coming out of that, and now companies figuring out, hey, I got to get into this supply chain activity. It's more than just a cost to be managed. It's something that's very valuable for my suppliers all the way to my customers and connecting everybody in between. So that's produced a scenario where we've got a lot of talent coming out of universities, young kids getting initial salaries higher than some engineers and financial folks, which hasn't been seen before because progressive companies are figuring out that they can really handle that talent in terms of attracting that talent and needing that talent within their companies. In addition, many of the students are getting offers from Wall Street firms, investment banking firms who want to acquire that talent because they can understand how to evaluate publicly traded companies. So it's a great opportunity to be in this discipline, yet we're faced with a talent gap that is only going to get worse unless we make this become a destination career and get it deeper into our lower levels of education as a destination career, which is something we all can talk about as we go through what's going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years.
Right. How about your customers, JB? What are they telling you about the talent gap?
The area emerging that I see for talent is in the technician world. Today it's not okay not to go to college, right? To get a 4-year degree. I've got a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, and everybody's going to college these days. It's very, very competitive to go to college, but we have this emerging need for technicians, mechanical, electrical, because as we put in more and more automation in our distribution centers and facilities, there's a tremendous lack of technicians. And so I think just from an educational perspective, our country needs to kind of refocus and say it's okay not to go down the college track if you're more likely to be successful or enjoy becoming a technician. Because if you think of Germany, they've got a great system for the 4-year schools and the educational schools, but they also have a tremendous technical programs over there to maintain, automation. And I'd like to see us as a country also acknowledge that technical training is important, and they're great jobs and they pay well. And it's something that's going to be very necessary as we continue to invest in automation in the years ahead. We've got some great customers who have some very automated systems out there, and trying to find people who can maintain those electromechanically is very, very difficult. And I think that ITT or some of the institutes out there that are doing technical training today are going to become more and more important as our labor force morphs.
Right. It's interesting. I guess a big question, and is interesting that we have a 6.5% unemployment rate, but a lot of you folks out there are having trouble finding talent. So I'm going to ask and turn it over to you folks now. Can some of you tell me what your challenges are about what you need to find, what your talent challenges are, and what you see it's going to be over the next 10 years? And keep in mind, 10 years from now, half of those people are going to be millennials from what we heard today. We have people with microphones around the room. Please wait for them to get to you because we are, I believe, recording this. But can somebody tell me, someone out there, what are some of the challenges that you have in finding talent? And shall I get up and walk around and pick on people, or can we get someone to get started? We get someone in the back here.
We've got someone over here.
One of our biggest challenges is our fourth quarter peak, where it's not so much on a professional workforce, it's the labor workforce out there in the DCs, and it goes up exponentially. And the small time to train, as well as get those people up and running, and then they're back on the street, 8 weeks from then.
Right. Over here.
We're starting to see a lot of challenges with our IT professionals, and as we look forward, I'm concerned that it's going to become more and more competitive to try to retain that talent, and that is a specialized field. And I think as the economy continues to do well, that's something that's kind of at the forefront of our retention efforts.
Hey, I think it'd be helpful if you could introduce yourself and your company so we can all kind of put a name and a face together, if you don't mind.
Sure, Steve Venegas with Eddie Bauer.
Yeah.
Right.
Joe Matthews with Maddox.
Thank you.
Right. Now, staying with this topic of people for a moment, let me ask again. We've seen, I think maybe most of you are familiar with what Walgreens has done in terms of staffing their distribution centers with developmentally challenged folks. Have any of you got here initiatives to attract, other than the traditional distribution center or manufacturer employee? Anybody can share any stories that they have about what they're doing over here? Just wait for the mic, please. Thanks.
My name is Volker Schmitz with the firm Schmalz. When you mentioned Walgreens, it kind of set me off a little bit, because I agree with you. They've done a tremendous amount to broaden their labor pool, or availability of their labor pool, which I think is important. I can't tell you how many of companies like yourselves that I see out there that have a very narrow job description for the employee that they're trying to hire, because he has to be 6'4" to unpack stuff from 8 feet high up to depalletize, which is done manually, and that's what I see even still at Walgreens. Some of these tasks that they have, these jobs are very, very narrow, and they still have people walking along a very expensive AGV vehicle, still manually schlepping around 50 pounds, 300 times a day, times the 20, 30 miles that they're having to walk a day. And it's that physicality that leads, to my opinion, to the high turnover, and trying to address that, I think, is important, but nobody's really spending enough time on that, in my opinion.
So how about high turnover? Has anybody had any success in reducing their turnover, particularly among hourly labor, to help retain those kinds of folks? Any stories out there? So it sounds like we've got a real challenge on that hourly level, high turnover, difficult jobs. Let's turn to the professional level. We see an awful lot of people coming out of the universities, as Rick said, highly trained, highly qualified, maybe bring whole different attitudes, though, as we heard Hannah talk about. Rick, you've got the Young Professionals Organization as part of it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, they're young professionals. We just sort of categorize them as 30 years or younger, and then the minute they reach 30 or 31, they want to elevate the young professional category to a different
And then they're
name.
old professionals?
Yeah, well, then they, old, wise, and
Yeah.
But I mean, their attitude is I think they change. I think they get out of school with an attitude of, I'm going into the workplace and I'm going to show them what I can do. And many of them do, and then they get in there and they realize there's no replacement for experience. And so, I talk to a lot of the universities, a lot of the students, and always tell them, look, your career is a journey, it's a marathon. Don't sprint through it. Don't go into your company asking, well, how do I become vice president of supply chain inside of 2 years? Somebody like Rob's going to give you a box of claims and tell you to go figure those out. They tell a story. And so you got to go through that experiential career in order to have the breadth and depth and knowledge to be a significant and effective leader. So I mean, they're coming out with great skills, with great understanding, but once they get into a company, they realize there's no replacement for actual experience. And so we try to coach them, look, go to Chick-fil-A and be a transportation analyst, and move over to an inventory analyst, and go work in customer service, go work in a distribution center in Pennsylvania on the first day of deer hunting season, when nobody shows up. I mean, go work, as Joe said. I mean, I think it's up to us as leaders in the supply chain to explain to our companies. I worked in the food industry for 25 years, and it was always amazing. The 13th week of every quarter, everybody got hungry. Why did that happen? And it was us in the supply chain that went to the leadership and said, that's tied to sales bonuses, and you're shipping a lot of shipments that have no connection to consumer takeaway, if you were. So it was up to the supply chain leaders to try to explain all that. So we got a lot of work to do inside our companies to explain the value that we have, and I think this younger generation's coming in with a skill set and maybe an expectations that are a little bit different. I think it's up to us as mentors to coach them through it and reap what they have to offer, but still make sure they understand there's an experience they have to go through.
Yeah. Mentoring is an interesting idea. Did anybody share stories about mentoring in your companies that helps bring young professionals into the company? Anybody have that kind of a program? Just by a show of hands, how many have mentoring for new employees? Just a few. That's interesting. That's interesting. Jim, following up on what we just heard, what are your customers doing in terms of bringing these young professionals, great technical experience, but never worked in a DC before, helping them understand operationally how to fit into an organization?
Well, I probably don't get as much exposure to them as I'd like, but from what I understand, it's very similar to what Rick just shared. Is they'll bring young professionals in and they'll try and put them in an area for a year and then move them to another area for a year and give them exposure to the different sides of the business, and hopefully over a 5 to 10 year period they'll be able to identify those who can become leaders in the organization and move them up from there. But that's about the limit of the exposure I've seen with our clients.
The other thing I'd offer too, Peter, is interpersonal skills are increasingly important, in particular in a global discipline like we are. I'll get students at universities saying, how do I go up to a very senior level leader and introduce how do I communicate and connect with them? I'll say, well, if you're at a reception like this, you might go up, smile, look them in the eye, extend a hand. That's called a handshake, and and they just networking as we all grew up with. It's very, very different with them, and they kid around about it, and they'll tell you that they're very nervous about going up, to golf and introducing themselves. Now, he can't intimidate anybody, but they don't know that. And they just are reluctant to do it. So, whenever we're out with all of them, it's part of our job and obligation to go up to young folks and introduce ourselves to them and, welcome them into the discipline so they understand how to network and relate.
Yeah, well, in the back here.
Dave Haley with Tyco. Just back to your other question earlier, one of the things we've done recently is we've started looking at veterans coming back from their service. I heard it talk about the technical competency. I think I can teach them that. I have a hard time teaching people leadership. And we found this pool of talent that they're born leaders. They've gone to West Point, they've gone to the military academies, they're college graduates, they've led organizations and had responsibilities way more than I'll ever ask them to do. Maybe they don't know the ins and outs of DC operation or the ins and outs of managing the logistics piece of it. I can teach them that. But if they already come to my group knowing how to lead, how to take charge, how to be positive role models, they're way ahead of the game. And to the question about the spikes, we've gone to a dedicated part-time workforce, people who aren't looking to grow, people who aren't looking to move ahead, people who are looking to make an extra $400 a week for their family, or a housewife who gets out at night for a couple hours and loads a truck up. And if you work them 6 hours or 2 hours or 4 hours, they're happy as can be. So that's a couple strategies we're using to get around that. And I think we just have to commit to understanding wherever they come from, they're going to have to learn your business, they're going to have to learn your processes. And we have a great Peach State engineered building, but we still need to teach people how it works.
Right. A couple of great points. Others out here, do anybody have any special outreach to veterans? Tiger does in the back.
We do.
Okay.
We're right on a military base, so we're on Fort Riley, and so, sorry, Tarsha with Foot Locker. So we are literally located right off a military base, so we work in conjunction with Fort Riley, and so we often reach out to that military base and work with their retirees as they're coming off, both for the Wounded Warriors program to their supervisor, from just supervisory levels down to their technical that actually works into our maintenance department really well, and just right into the hourly ranks as well. Just wherever they fit in, it's been a great skill set. We've had one that's she was an engineer in the logistics field that's come over. So we've had quite a few that have joined our programs, but it's been an absolute wonderful program with us and a great partnership for the military. And I would encourage anyone who has a connection to their military to reach out to it, because it's a wonderful opportunity.
Good.
I actually have. I'm sorry. I had
No,
a
go ahead,
question
please.
while is here. So this goes back to the non-technical workforce, non-professional workforce. So for your hourly associates in the distribution and the warehousing side of the house, and down to the younger workforce, the millenniums. Has anyone else seen, and one of the things we're struggling with at Foot Locker is there is an age gap. So with this workforce, we have a lot of baby boomers, we have some Gen Xers, we have an aging workforce. This is not a field that millenniums like. They do not want to be pickers, packers, receivers, shippers. So this is a field that we're struggling with. And one of the things we've really noticed with this group, the more we talk to them, the few that we do have in this field, they do not like the incentive, the skill-based pay per performance, the production standards. These are just traditional things in a warehouse environment that have been there for a long time, and it's basically where it's motivated the other workers. This has really kind of been demotivating for this workforce and this group. Has anyone else seen this or dealt with this? I don't know.
Yeah, a couple of hands up here. Good. I'll get to you in just a minute. You respond to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark Fisher with New Belgium Brewing Company. We've got a distribution center full of millennials, and they, and this kind of goes back to a question about how to retain hourly workforce in such of an environment. And I mean, we have a less than 2% turnover rate, and I think it's highly attributed to giving them ownership. And it's not just ownership as in we give them shares in the company, which we do, but we give them ownership in decision-making in their areas of responsibility, and we give them ownership in participating in policy-making and procedures within their areas as well. And I think that's a huge motivating factor in keeping those workers at the place.
Interesting. We had, up here we had a
Golf Scott.
We also addressed the millenniums because they told us they'd rather have paid time off. So we changed everything in the reward system to take away the gifts and the money and convert it to earn credits for paid time off, because they don't necessarily care about working 40 hours, but they got to pay the rent.
Interesting. Good.
Yeah,
In the back?
Brandon Tandy with Walmart. Just on the veteran initiative, I think one of the best things we've done in a long time is the corporate national initiative to guarantee veterans a job if they've been discharged honorably within 12 months of their discharge. And we've done it. It's been wonderful for us. The gentleman spoke to the leadership capabilities of the people that have been in the service. We found both at the hourly and salary ranks, it's helped us attract better candidates. We've really benefited by that. And while I have the mic, I don't know if we plan on talking about diversity while we're on the topic of people.
I mean, that's absolutely appropriate, sure.
We struggle to attract diverse talent. We work very hard at it, but still struggle to meet the objectives that we set for ourselves. I just wonder if anybody else has any initiatives, has been very successful at that. But I think there's a lot of work to be done in that arena.
Right. In terms of diversity, has anyone had other kinds of experience in bringing in a more diverse workforce? I mean, we know there are technology aids out there, for example. Some of the voice systems are multilingual, may help. But what other recruiting and different neighborhoods are offering transportation from the city out to your DC? Anyone have those kinds of programs? George, on the topic of right here, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll hold it. You can't. No.
Good. She should be a singer.
I think you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Because otherwise I have to stand. Okay, thanks. So just a quick question, and to add on to the comment about diversity, one of the things that we've had struggle with is trying to get women, particularly in transportation, up to the top of the ranks. So, you know, it's hard to get women up to the top if you can't get them in initially. And I think as of just a couple of years ago, only about 6% of females were selecting supply chain as a major when they went to college. So one of the things that we're going to try this year, and this is hopefully it will be successful, is that we do a Take Your Child to Work Day, and I've done it for 5 years for 9 to 15-year-olds. And I'm hoping that at some point in time in the near future, that some parent or a kid will come and send me an email saying they have chosen supply chain as a major as a result of this robust program that we've put in place. One of the other suggestions that came from that is that we need to target a similar, not Take Your Child to Work Day, but introduce Supply Chain Day to women that are either second semester freshman year of college or first semester sophomore year of college that are undecided majors. And so we're putting together a program that we hope to launch in October for the first time and target local Atlanta schools, so UGA, Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, and to see if we can get enough women interested in coming to our Supply Chain Day to introduce them, at least to the concepts, and have a little bit of something going on for everybody. So those are some of the things that we're doing to try and attract at least women to the world of supply chain. And I'm going to hand this microphone back right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting challenge. I mean, I've been coming to these for 25 years, and one of my editors, a woman, likes to joke. She says, only at CSCMP is the line outside the men's room and outside the women's room. So, it is the real challenge to bring that talent in. In terms of talent development, George, maybe tell us a little bit about what MHI, you've got some things going on, right?
Well, yes, thank you. I can't hold that, right? Yeah, we also have a young professionals network that we have started as well, actually, and have done it in conjunction with Rick's group as well, and also Mahida. And we're really have a strategic focus on our education thing. To Jim's point, I think in our educational system we've done a disservice to the previous couple generations by focusing so much on college and not preparing them for the transition in the workplace that's happened with regard to jobs that are out there. So we just hired a new vice president of education, Daniel Stanton, who actually works with Rick and has known Rick a long time, and we're very excited about what he's going to help bring to the table in terms of collaboration with all the other groups in our area to elevate the awareness of the supply chain jobs and opportunities that are out there.
So a lot of outreach seems to be developing, and that's a good thing. I'd like to shift gears a little bit then and talk about one of the solutions to labor issues, and that's kind of the automation and the development of robotics. JB, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of automation replacing labor?
Well, it is, it's definitely becoming more commonplace, more affordable. The returns on investment are making more and more sense, particularly if you have facilities that run 24/7, 365, if it's maybe temperature controlled, if it's a union operation, or it's in a town that you can't find skilled labor. Certainly automation is becoming more and more justifiable. Certainly not saying that it's the right answer in all cases, because it is not. But you have to incrementally justify any investments in automation and technology. So I think that the reliability of the control systems and the mechanics are becoming more and more commonplace. So it's more reliable, it's more affordable as as we get through the early adoption curve, and more companies are generating more revenue. The price will continue to come down, and the justifications will go up. So I think in the U.S. we're going to see more and more automation across the board being used by companies in all verticals. I just think that's the trend.
And specifically in automation, we discussed a couple of months ago where we stood in robotics in the DC. Robotics is huge in manufacturing. What's the trend line for robotic adoption of robotics?
I think it's kind of looks like this right now. Robotics, and not just in material handling or distribution, but robotics in all parts of life are becoming more and more prevalent. And I think that's going to be one of the disruptors as well, as the use of robotics, whether it's driving, trucks down the road, or it's flying airplanes, or it's stacking cases on a pallet or depalletizing. Or it's in the armed forces in the military. I continue to read about the use of robotics. Google bought a robotic company. I think Facebook bought a robotic company. I think everybody realizes that, the image we had in 1956 of the driverless car with the family. I think that the army of the future could be a bunch of robotic devices out there. And so I think the investment, the information, the IT, the controls, the mechanics are all coming together. We're going to see in the next 10 years a proliferation in the use of robotics across all facets of life.
How about in this audience, in the survey you did for us, by the way, do we have that available? Yeah. We did a brief survey, and one of the interesting things on the survey is that 38% of you said you were late adopters of technology versus 19% who they were innovators, or 5% who said they were early adopters. How about the adoption of these kinds of advanced technologies? Can you tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about in your companies in terms of what are going to be the requirements for you to say, yeah, we're going to try robotics or test it, or some of these other new technologies? Anybody using robotics in their DCs at this point? Nobody. I think probably many of you are using other forms of automation, though. What are some of the driving factors in the adoption of automation? Is it labor? Is it cost? Is it be able to run 24/7? Is it e-commerce? Tell me a little bit about what you're thinking about in terms of the technological developments in your DCs. Any volunteers out there? Over here, down here, and then in the back.
I'm Kevin Fifield with Cabela's, and we brought some automated equipment in the last few years, and the biggest thing from a success standpoint was getting the employees involved up front in designing what that process flow was going to look like, as opposed to the engineers or the ops managers dictating what it was going to look like. And because they were involved up front, and not just the frontline employees, but our maintenance folks, our IT folks, we had a resounding success with that AutoPack technology. We've gone on to the point of bringing that into another one of our facilities this year and another one next year. So anytime we've undergone a change, by and large, the biggest reason for the success is the multi-level participation of folks to make that work, because of the vesting that they have.
Right. In the back.
Yeah, Steve Venegas with Eddie Bauer. One of our challenges is still a fundamental one. So we love automation, but the return on investment case or justification just has to be there. And it'd be nice to open up a catalog and say, I'll take that, I'll take that, I'll take that. Go ahead and put it in. But we live in a cost-justified world, at least, and so that's one of our constraints naturally, and I don't think we're unique in that regard. In terms of our business, we also see a lot of challenges with our peak to average volume, right? So Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and one of the trends that I see continuing in direct-to-consumer order fulfillment is the customer expectation for shipping, right? Same day shipping, and even shipping through some of this holiday schedule. So I can tell you that we personally work on Thanksgiving to fulfill orders. That's how great our peak to average demand is. So, we pay extra, we pay double time, we pay our associates incentives. We don't like doing it. But how, as an industry, how do you compete with the customer expectation that they put an order today, they want it to ship today? That's a challenging dynamic when when you also consider your labor management expectations, right? Your relationship with your associates and your values as an organization. That's one that we're working through. We're servicing. We at Eddie Bauer know that we're there. We exist to service the customer, and the day we forget that, it's a sad day for us. But at the same time, where do you draw the line? Because it is something that is continuing to grow. Customer expectations are getting higher and higher.
Well, just to comment on that, I know in our preparation discussions, we had a lot of talk about same-day ordering and shipping. Is it just a fad because somebody tried it and can do it, so everybody else has to give it a whirl? And do you really need your refrigerator filter by 3 p.m. this afternoon that you ordered at 10 a.m. this morning? And by the way, it's all free shipping, so we appreciate UPS and FedEx donating their shipping because nobody buys anything. And I get that question all the time. How does UPS and FedEx afford free shipping? Because nobody ever pays for shipping on the internet. So we're in one of the most promotional periods we've ever been in. I mean, nobody pays full price for anything, and there's a coupon or some code associated with everything that you buy online. And so it's a chance for, those organizations, and they're doing a great job of getting consumers to go to it. So, what happens when 40 or 45% of every retail dollar is bought in that channel through some online segment? What does it do to your distribution center? I mean, Thanksgiving is no longer, we're racing for that first hour to open up and get those sales, right? Every year it changes, and so it's only going to continue. And so what does it mean to our supply chains as we go forward?
Yeah. But it's a good way to, I think, shift into the conversation of omni-channel and e-commerce. We can see from the results, and one of the biggest challenges people are seeing is omni-channel, and I think probably very closely related to that is transportation, some of the issues we're facing in the transportation industry. As we heard someone, I think it was from Home Depot earlier today, saying that basically you can't be in the retail business anymore without being in thinking about omni-channel and e-commerce. Tell us a little bit about that. Can you tell us about some of the challenges your companies are facing in terms of the development of e-commerce, omni-channel, and where you see it going and what it's going to mean in your future in terms of the percentage of sales or the way that you do business or the way you run your distribution centers? Down front again, thanks. Kevin?
Kevin Fifield with Cabela's again. We've kind of tackled this one pretty aggressively the last couple of years, and really we're trying to think of it as a competitive advantage by using our back rooms in our stores as a mini distribution center. So it has created multiple challenges for us, particularly from a distributed order management process where you've got 3 different time zones across the country, and we have stores from Scarborough, Maine to Washington State, and how the capacities of each of those stores fill up. It's a problem for us, but I'm sure we'll figure it out working with Manhattan. But it is a big deal where we're trying to just understand the Amazon effect and how do we leverage the back room as well as the front room of the store.
Right, that's interesting. And we saw, I think it was last week or the week before, that I think Walmart announced that they're turning over their back rooms to their logistics organization, their back of store. In that regard, how do your store managers react to that sort of development?
It's interesting. I think that for the most part, the GMs are on board with it. We in supply chain pay for the labor, and right now the sales are targeted to the direct channel, but I'm sure in the next couple of years that'll just be one sales dollar, and they'll be comped or bonused on what they produce from the front end and the back end of the store.
Right, interesting. And that Walmart development, can you tell us any more about that? Yes.
I guess where we're headed, or what we're trying to figure out, is just how to meet the customer's demands and their expectations. At first, you may feel like they're unrealistic, but I don't think they're going to change or back off. So we're trying to figure out ways to meet their needs. If they want to buy something online and have it delivered to the store, if they want to buy it online and have it delivered to their home, if they buy online and want to have it delivered to a locker, to a store in a different state where they're going to be on vacation. I think those expectations are what customers have, and that's just growing. So, we're challenged. It's a great challenge to figure out how to meet those needs and re-engineer the supply chain and use your existing assets and repurpose your assets to meet those needs. But if you don't, you're going to lose. I believe that. So we've repurposed, I think we have a couple hundred stores that do ship from store. Just specifically in the way that we would compete with Amazon, I think we have more distribution points. So we don't know, we're trying to figure out how to use those well and shipping from the store so that we're same day, next day to as many customers as possible. They're building distribution centers like crazy. They've got more distribution centers than we do, but if we use our stores and use that inventory, we're closer to the customer. So that's what we're trying to do. And I think one thing that's helped is you've dealt with it, but the store's getting credit for the sale. Makes a big difference on how they adopt the program and support that with labor and do a good job following up on it.
Interesting. Anyone else in this area, in the whole e-commerce, omni-channel kind of thing? What are the challenges that you're facing, or what steps you're taking? What are you doing in your companies to address this? Rick, tell what your members.
Well, I want to just bring up one thing. This is a conversation around 2025. If we fast forward, do we think, our traditional 8-hour day seems to need to vaporize? Because to build on what JB said and also what Michelle said, I mean, a combination of automation and our employee workforce. I mean, we still have this basically 8-hour day and some rules guarding us against full-time and part-time, and LOP on healthcare legislation, all the other rules that are imposed and bestowed upon us for our workforce. Probably all that needs to get retooled in terms of things that are going on within the supply chain, the technology that we use, and how do we use our labor much differently, like what was explained there, that ongoing part-time force. What a great idea. It's it's an ability to flex in and out when you need to, but yet we have these rules guiding us toward a too structured of a workforce. Probably needs to be blown up and retooled.
Interesting. It comes back to workforce again. It's interesting that it does, because we've got so many changes in the way our economy is working. In terms of that whole e-commerce, JB, what is it happening? We saw a little bit from the Home Depot presentation. What's happening in distribution center design to address the whole omni-channel development?
Well, it's as Dean said in his presentation, typically your order fulfillment methodologies are different. So you have to have WMS software that can support more than one type of order fulfillment methodology. B2C and replenishing stores or sending large orders to your wholesalers are totally different activities and different processes. So, leveraging your, it's all about, to me, is about leveraging assets. So it's leveraging your real estate, your systems, your people, the equipment that you have, the information, and certainly the inventory. Who gets the inventory? That's what I think everybody's trying to tackle. The thing that I find fascinating about 2025 is if e-commerce continues to grow at the rate it is, 16, 18% per year, to Rick's point, when it's 30 or 40% of all retail sales, what happens to retail real estate in stores and malls? I mean, what is the demand to have all of these stores for people to go to if they're not going to stores, they're ordering online? And what is the impact on that retail real estate and the mall? And how will those pieces of real estate ultimately be repurposed? Will they become mini distribution hubs? Will they become town centers? Because there's a lot of strip malls out there, as you know, that are empty with nobody in them. And I don't think that trend's changing anytime soon. So I think there's a big decision around, if I'm a retailer with stores, what does that look like in 2025? And do I need to have those, all the assets that I currently have today in real estate, or should I look at somehow, there certainly need to be thinking about how do I redeploy those assets, or if I continue to have those assets in the future. I know there's certain county governments and townships that are offering significant incentives for developers to repurpose empty strip malls and places like that. So I think it's going to be kind of fascinating. And if I'm retail, and I am in a sense, what does the store evolution what does that look like in the next 10 years? I think it's going to change dramatically.
Right. I wonder if the stores themselves will look differently too, as e-commerce becomes a bigger part of it.
Well, what's it do to all that inventory that's geographically dispersed? Do you need it? Does Office Depot need the real estate that they need, given, how we buy online products there? I think last year was the first year since World War II a mall was not built in the U.S. I read that, and so Jones Lang LaSalle and Cushman Way, all these commercial developers are trying to think about what do they do with that space. To JB, what you were saying, how do you repurpose it? Do you blow them up and create something else there? It's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens. The physical assets that are out there in the supply chain today.
Interesting. Some of that raises the whole issue of fulfillment. People are moving back into the cities are becoming more dense. Property's too expensive then to develop distribution centers in it. Getting product to the customer is going to be very interesting. The story is that Amazon is maybe shifting its whole distribution center to a private fleet, and where it has 40% of its customers, using UPS and FedEx, the others, and then slower, maybe USPS to its most rural customers. They don't talk much about it, but that's supposedly the way they're going. In the same time, we have huge issues in the trucking industry. Right now, I'm sure a lot of you are facing a lack of capacity in the truckload sector, seeing spot rates go up substantially. We've got a driver force that's, we don't have enough drivers as it is. We've got hours of service making them less productive. We've got the CSA regulations are taking more drivers off the road, and the average driver age is somewhere in the mid-50s. Let's talk a little bit about how you see transportation evolving in your companies and how you're going to purchase or utilize transportation. We're going to see a revival of private fleets or dedicated fleets. We hear a little bit about what some of the transportation challenges that you see out there for your businesses and how you're addressing them. Yeah, go ahead. Please, down in front of you.
Roger Gellis with Forward Air Solutions. We use a mixture of CDL drivers and non-CDL drivers for our business, owner-operators and company drivers, a mix. And the CDL side has become a real challenge. Getting guys to drive tractor trailers, they're just really hard to come by. And in our business, where a lot of what we do is store delivery, finding a Class A driver that wants to get out of his truck and actually physically handle freight, those guys are really hard to find. Anybody who's driving a tractor wants to just drive. So that's our biggest challenge. We find on the non-CDL side that we can find younger guys, young kids, to take those positions. We hire them on the dock. We train them. We're growing our own non-CDL drivers for the straight truck part of our business, but the Class A side is becoming a bigger and bigger challenge. And to your question, we don't have an answer. I think it's going to get tougher and tougher, and the costs are going to go higher and higher. And a lot of our customers understand that. Some of them don't. And it's going to create some challenges. I think it's obviously driving more customers and retailers to intermodal and other forms of transportation. But it's a huge challenge for us.
Yeah, that intermodal piece is pretty interesting to watch that growth, and the railroads certainly are very excited about that. We see how, and I wonder if that prices will end up high there as well. But an interesting challenge. Anyone else talk about what some of the transportation challenges up here in the back?
Randy Williams with Oracle. We're a hardware distributor to hardware stores. We run our own private fleet, but we try and make it as convenient as possible for the drivers. We give them the Ultra Shift transmissions. We give them good equipment. We make it as easy as possible. And we try and set up our schedule where they got only 2 overnight routes a week, so they're sleeping in their own bed. So we've been successful in getting drivers and hiring drivers. The challenge we've seen is with a lot of the CSA regulations and the health regulations right now, if a driver's on high blood pressure medicine, he can only get a CDL that maybe is a year, maybe it's 6 months, that has to be renewable every 6 months. That's becoming a bigger challenge because the driver force is getting older and older. They're on medications. The CDLs are limited. If something changes, we could lose 20 or 30% of our drivers tomorrow if they if they change the rules, and that concerns us. So we're trying to figure out how to hire younger drivers. We're setting up online applications where people can go online and find out about drivers and click and put in an application, so make it as easy as possible to attract and hire drivers. So that's what we're doing.
Interesting. Anyone else have some innovations or efforts in terms of equipment or the way you purchase transportation, or does it become part of the way you change your network? Longer haul intermodal and more nodes to distribute from? I'm just curious about what you're doing in your own businesses. Hey, Rick, you could address what you're hearing from your members.
Drones, baby. No, I mean, I'm doing a little work with the Department of Commerce. I'm chairing a committee called the Advisory Council on Supply Chain Competitiveness, and that's one of the areas where it's 40 people from industry saying, look, you got to work with the industry when you deal with these regulations so you don't have all these unintended consequences. And there are people in the Department of Commerce and Transportation and Labor that do care and do get it. You never hear from them. You hear the sound bites that bubble up, but that's one area that I think has to be worked. And I think the position's going to become more professional. We're all going to pay more. I mean, this country, 75% to 80% of everything that moves on a truck, and the geography is not going to change all that much. And so how are we going to find the drivers necessary to do it? And I think we're going to have, we talked earlier about manufacturers collaborating, even competing on the shelf, but collaborating in the supply chain to fill up our available capacity, whether that be rail or truck, to get the product where it needs to be, and beat each other up in the marketplace at the store level with marketing. We're going to have to do that if we really care about risk management, sustainability, and reducing emissions and all those types of things, because our economy is going to grow, our population is going to grow. Countries like Germany are going to come down. I mean, it's fascinating when Stuart Barney was here to hear his thoughts on just what's going on in the fertility rates and birth rates and so on in different countries. So a lot of major shifts are going to happen. We're going to have to deal with this, and I just, you're going to have to pay more for it. The job's going to become more professional.
Sure. And on the regulatory front, too, things about longer and heavier trucks have been a debate forever, whether we'll get there.
Right.
Is an interesting question.
So Peter, I have a question for you transportation folks. How far away are we from driverless over-the-road trucks? Is that something we're going to see by 2025? Is anybody experimenting? Is anybody working with any technology companies and doing laps around their building with a truck?
We're using robotic pallet jacks in one of our DCs. We're not doing anything outside in the yard or on the road, but within the four walls, we're certainly using robotic delivery equipment. It's pretty effective.
Yeah, I mean, because we've certainly, interesting, within the walls, so maybe pushing the envelope, certainly a lot of technological development and huge regulatory changes before we see robotic convoys out there. But interesting technology, kind of basically over-the-road trains of a sort when we get there. And to your earlier point, even everything that moves intermodal moves to intermodal on truck, away from intermodal on a truck. So trucks are going to be with us forever. Finding those drivers and so on is important. In the back here.
MHI. I was just going to make a comment that I was at the Supply Chain Transportation Show in France 2 weeks ago, and one of the panels that I went to, they actually have driverless vehicles that they're using in the inner cities now. The trucks bring it to a certain point, and then this automated vehicle comes off and goes down the street to the storefront. So they're making some pretty good progress in that sense. And we also at the MODEX show just a few weeks ago had the first drone, to Mike's point, or to Rick's point, had the first drone. There was a company that was from Europe that had a drone that they did their first test flight last November, and it's got a 250-ton payload. Just fascinating.
Ton or pound?
Ton.
Wow.
It's just, Yeah.
It's like a C-130.
Yeah, yeah. It's just. I mean, it's just. But it's fascinating that to me that they had done their first flight. Obviously, there's huge regulation things in this country, but this was done over in Europe.
I mean, we're comfortable flying on autopilot in commercial airlines, right?
Right. Exactly. So.
Right. Yeah, interesting.
Think
Right
about
here.
that.
There also one other. There was a maritime portion to this thing, and they were talking about these new ships that are 18,000 TEUs that are going to be unmanned.
So they go to the port and the tugboat takes it in from there. Yeah, we could probably see that down the road is, the long over-the-road runs are with driverless transportation, and they get to a point where somebody jumps in the cab and takes it to the delivery point to make sure it gets unloaded. That would be another option that I could see in the next 10 years.
Right here.
Rob Dugas, Chick-fil-A. Not an expert in this field at all, but just observing from a macro level. If an iPhone can come as far as it has in 7 years, and where cars have gone in terms of automated technology in the past 18, 24 months, I think it'd be foolish to not think that we'll get there in the trucking industry, if nothing else, to give us some safety or some driver assist that actually may change some of the regulatory requirements. So that's a thought. The other thing, to me, it seems like we are almost short-sighted when we think about both people, our industry, and technology. And what I mean by that is the brand that we have in supply chain, I think, is way behind where it needs to be. In order to attract talent and to bring the talent into the industry that we need to, we've got to reconsider how we position ourselves. There's no more purchasing departments for a reason. There's supply chain departments. We still have distribution centers and warehouses, and they still feel like 1950s distribution centers and warehouses when you walk through a lot of them, even though there's technology. Going to a lot of manufacturing facilities, and the technology there is much different. It's a different environment, it's a different working environment, attracts a different type of employee. We work in poultry. I mean, I see it in chicken, so I can't help to believe we can't see that in distribution and logistics as well. So I think we have a branding opportunity there. On the other side, on information, at the turn of the century, not this one, but the last one, just 100 years ago is when electricity became ubiquitous. And if you think about when electricity first came about, the infrastructure of that was kind of hit and miss. In a rural location, in a high winds, you might lose electricity. We didn't quite know what to do with it. It was a light bulb, then it was an electric refrigerator. And then at some point during the century, electricity was no longer the goal. It was just the enabler to do everything else. And so everything we grew up with, that just you plug into the wall, you don't think twice about it, is how we think about electricity. Well, I think information is that for this generation. I think information, the way we think about it in our generation, we still think of it kind of like new electricity. What do we do with this thing? How do I use information? And I think that's backwards. I think we've got to get to the point where we figure out how to do the work, because the information is going to be there. Information will be readily available, real time, in places that we can't imagine and ways we can't imagine today. And so I think we've got to step back and think about what our business looks like, all business, with the information being as accessible as electricity is today. And so no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you're going to be able to know where the inventory is, where the products are, where what you want is, how to get it from point A to point B. And I think consumers will actually drive the choice there. They'll decide how they want to use that information. And if we're still trying to figure out how to do it with today's bias towards information and technology, we'll be behind, and we'll stay behind, and we'll stay behind. So at some point, 2025 is that 10-year window is the equivalent of probably a 50-year window last century. And so I think it's going to come faster. And I think this next generation, these edgers and these millennials, they'll think about it differently. They'll just come at it with solutions, assuming information, assuming that infrastructure. And I think we've got to be just ready to embrace that, listen to that, and understand that. So I think there's two big opportunities for our industry.
Interesting.
Just one other thing to throw out, 2025, 3D printing. I mean, just think about what's going on out there now. If you've ever never seen it, yeah, I mean, it's Hershey is now saying they're really close to where we can make a Hershey bar in our home with 3D printing. I mean, what to do to the whole supply chain when you think about making pretty large things. Boeing's got a 19 movable part fuel cell on planes today that's stronger. It's lighter, so think about that multiplied by the amount of planes all made with a 3D printer.
Yeah, I mean, Carlos, you're with Daimler Truck. I mean, I think of auto parts and 3D printing. You've got they've got this super long tail, right? How many SKUs do you guys carry? 400,000 or some astronomical number of SKUs that don't move. Well, what if you just printed them in the local shop whenever somebody needed one? That's a real. I mean, that's coming. I think in 2025. That's absolutely. So what does that do with your distribution center of the future? I mean, do you have to have that inventory at all? Do you need these big, huge boxes at all? Do you have all the labor running it at all? That's going to be very interesting to follow 3D printing. I mean, I've heard they have successfully printed a human organ with a 3D printer.
Hips, knees?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So, as supply chain executives, we need to be researching and understanding what is the possible impact of 3D printing to my inventory and my supply chain, or even at the store level. Do we need to keep products in inventory in the store level, or can we print them on demand? It's fascinating.
Interesting. I think kind of our takeaway from all of this is, did we have someone else?
Wyckoff with Polaris, and we talk about how fast things are happening. One of the things that's frustrating and challenging in a business is changing a WMS fast enough to keep up with this, and I hope that the systems will be able to move. We talk about all the data, but the systems will be able to change and mold them to what we want to do in a business fast enough, because I'm probably have 5 years worth of projects that I'd love to do this year if I could.
Right. So finally, I guess what change is constant, but the speed of change is not, and we're accelerating faster than ever, to the point that the next 10 years is the equivalent to the last 50. So I guess we come away from this session saying we've got a lot of challenges out there based on the things we do know, and there's a lot of things that we don't know, a lot of disruptive technologies that or forces that are yet to come along. And we've got the whole globe to compete with at the same time. So it makes it very interesting. Ralph, I think we're about out of time. Is that right?
Ralph's out of time, evidently.
Ralph left. I think we were supposed to wrap up at 5:15, and we are there. So I want to thank you all very much for your time, your attention, and your contributions. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate that. All I heard was 3D and Nestle or chocolate bar, Hershey bar. So you got my attention right there. Thank you very much. Let's give them another hand. So 2025, not that long from now. I was talking to somebody in the back of the room. We were talking about 3D printing. I'm sure a lot of us can remember the first time we had a photocopier and how long it took to produce a copy. And we would sit there and wait for it. And today we get angry if it takes like a half a second to make a photocopy. Well, I think that's where 3D printing is going. And I think there's a lot of things coming up in the next 10 years as it relates to automation, labor, transportation, these things that are going on that I don't even know that we're even thinking about right now. So, I'm going to obviously send out a survey after the conference. I'll talk to the board of advisors. I'd kind of like to make this session something we do on an ongoing basis, not necessarily supply chain 2025, but just this vision, this looking forward, this talking about where we're going. Because as the supply chain executives, we obviously have to know what's going on today, and we have to be able to deal with the transportation, labor, automation, and the other issues that the roadmap report and the state of logistics, which again, by the way, you have on your flash drive, talk about. But we also have to be able to look forward. So give that some thought. We'll talk about that going forward. Thanks again to the panel, to Mr. Bradley, the moderator. What's going to happen now is we're going to a networking reception. That's going to begin at 5:30 outside of the ballroom where we had breakfast and lunch today. We will network there for about a half an hour. Then we will have dinner beginning at 6 o'clock this evening, so please join us for that. And then around 7 o'clock, I've got a gentleman coming in who comes from change management, somebody who's going to talk about 5 ways of amazing, and he's going to do it using magic and illusions. And the reason I brought him on is because one of the things he does is he takes an actual chain and he pulls it through his body. And I thought, that's pretty cool for the supply chain. So that all happens this evening. So thank you again for staying today, for sticking it out. We really appreciate it. I'm sure you got a lot out of this, as I did. See you at 5:30 at the reception.